In 636 AD, a 400-year-old ancient superpower made the most arrogant mistake in military history. The mighty Sassanid Empire thought they were facing a band of starving desert raiders. They literally offered the Arab army dates and cheap clothing, telling them to just take the food and go home. 4 days later, their elite 60,000-man army would be completely annihilated, and their empire wiped from the map forever. You saw the title. You clicked to see the suicidal elephant charge. And we will get there. We will show you exactly how desperate men had to break formation and dive under 33 living ironclad tanks to blind them with spears and sever their trunks. But believe me, that brutal bloodbath is only a fraction of the nightmare that was Al-Qadisiyyah. If you stick around until the end, you'll discover the bizarre, almost demonic psychological trick the Arabs used to terrify the Persian cavalry. You'll uncover the chilling reality of the Night of Howls, a pitch-black slaughter where thousands of exhausted men hacked blindly at each other in total darkness, unable to see who they were killing. And finally, you will witness the humiliating, chaotic final moments of the brilliant Persian general trapped in a blinding sandstorm. How did an invincible, heavily armored empire collapse into pure panic in just 96 hours? The truth is darker and far more brutal than you can imagine. Let's step into the meat grinder. The ancient world was shifting. For over 4 centuries, the Sassanid Empire had stood as an unbreakable titan, dominating the East and trading heavy blows with the Romans. But decades of exhausting conflicts had left the empire bruised. Now, a new, highly motivated force was pressing against its borders. The Arab army of the Rashidun Caliphate, commanded by the respected veteran Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, had marched deep into Iraq. They numbered around 30,000 men. To crush this advance, the Sassanid capital dispatched its finest military mind. General Rostam Farrokhzad led a massive, heavily equipped force of roughly 60,000 men. These were elite, well-disciplined troops, clad in chainmail and armed with the best steel of the era. Confident in his overwhelming numbers and superior equipment, Rostam sought to avoid a costly engagement. He believed this was merely a border raid driven by hunger. When Arab emissaries arrived at the Persian camp, Rostam attempted to resolve the standoff with wealth. He offered them fine clothing, horses, and wagons loaded with dates, suggesting they simply take the gifts and return to their harsh deserts. The Persian commander severely underestimated the conviction of his opponents. The emissaries rejected the tribute, offering a stark ultimatum: accept their faith, pay the required tax, or let steel decide their fate. The offer of dates and silk meant nothing to men driven by a profound new purpose. The time for diplomacy had ended. The plains of Al-Qadisiyyah presented a deceptive battlefield. Military history often proves that the ground itself can decide the outcome before a single weapon is drawn. General Rostam ordered his massive army to cross the Atik River, moving to face the Arab forces directly. He arranged his heavy infantry and cavalry into a formidable line stretching for miles across the flat earth. However, this impressive deployment held a hidden flaw. The Sassanid army now had the river immediately at their backs. The only way across the water was a single bridge and a handful of boats. On the opposing side, the Arab commander Sa'd was suffering from a severe illness, making it impossible for him to mount a horse. He took up a position on the roof of an old fortress overlooking the field, preparing to direct his troops using a system of signal flags. Unlike the Persians, his men had the vast, open desert behind them, a familiar terrain that provided a safe avenue to regroup if their lines were broken. The board was fully set. Two vastly different military philosophies were locked in place, ready to ignite a conflict that would rewrite the borders of the known world. If you want to uncover more deep dives into the greatest tactical maneuvers and epic historical showdowns, make sure to subscribe to the channel right now. As the morning sun illuminated the opposing camps, the heavy silence of the plains was about to shatter. The tension snapped with a deafening roar as the Sassanid army initiated the engagement. It began not with the clash of steel, but with the sky darkening under the weight of thousands of arrows. The Persian archers were renowned for their rapid and heavy volleys, and they unleashed a relentless storm upon the Arab lines. The air hissed constantly as iron points rained down, creating immediate chaos. The Arab archers attempted to return fire, but their lighter bows struggled to find purchase against the thick, overlapping plates of Sassanid heavy armor. The opening moments belonged entirely to the Persians, pressing their technological advantage to soften the enemy ranks. Then, Rostam ordered his vanguard to advance, and the true terror of the Sassanid arsenal was revealed. From the dust and the backlines, the armored elephant corps moved forward. These were not mere transport animals, they were highly trained engines of disruption, imported from the Indian provinces and heavily modified for war. Each beast wore segmented iron plating and carried a wooden howdah, a fortified tower from which archers and spearmen could fire downward with absolute impunity. As these 33 behemoths lumbered toward the Arab right flank, the ground physically shook. The psychological impact was devastating. The Arab horses, entirely unaccustomed to the colossal size and the strong, unfamiliar scent of the elephants, panicked wildly. Cavalry formations instantly dissolved as horses reared and bolted, refusing to go anywhere near the approaching monsters. With their cavalry scattered, the Arab infantry on the right wing was left completely exposed. The elephants crashed into the infantry lines, shattering shields and trampling men underfoot, swinging their heavy trunks to sweep away anyone in their path. The line began to buckle under the sheer physical mass of the assault. Watching from his vantage point on the fortress roof, Saad realized that his right flank was minutes away from total collapse. He urgently signaled his center-right cavalry commander, ordering an immediate flanking maneuver to relieve the pressure. The Arab cavalry, fighting fiercely to control their terrified mounts, swung wide and charged the Persian infantry, supporting the elephants. Simultaneously, localized commanders ordered their best archers to target the men sitting in the howdahs, while courageous infantrymen darted between the massive legs, trying desperately to cut the straps securing the armored saddles. It was a desperate, chaotic effort, but it worked just enough to force the elephants to pull back and relieve the crumbling wing. The first day had begun as a nightmare, and the sun was still high in the sky. As the first day wore on, Rostam pushed his advantage, sending wave after wave of heavy infantry against the Arab center and left wing. The combat devolved into a grueling slugfest of endurance. The better equipped Sassanids relentlessly ground against the fiercely determined Arab troops. Neither side offered quarter. By the time the sun finally dipped below the horizon, the lines disengaged, leaving a battlefield littered with the fallen. The first day ended in a bloody stalemate, but the psychological toll on the Arab army was immense. The elephants had proven to be a nearly unstoppable force, and everyone knew they would return. However, the second day dawned with an unexpected shift in momentum. The Sassanid elephant corps was conspicuously absent from the field. The beasts had sustained enough superficial damage and broken saddlery that they needed a day to be repaired and refitted. More importantly, as noon approached, a massive cloud of dust appeared on the horizon from the direction of Syria. Reinforcements were arriving for the Arab army. The vanguard was led by Al-Qaqa ibn Amr, a brilliant and seasoned tactician. Understanding the importance of morale, Al-Qaqa did not commit his forces all at once. Instead, he divided his men into smaller squadrons, instructing them to arrive on the battlefield in continuous intervals. From the Persian perspective, it looked as if an endless sea of fresh troops was pouring into the Arab camp, delivering a sharp blow to Sassanid confidence. With the elephants out of the equation and fresh blood in their ranks, the Arab commanders sought to capitalize on the moment. But Al-Qaqa knew that matching heavy infantry against heavy infantry wasn't enough. He needed a psychological weapon to counter what the elephants had done to their horses the day before. He ordered his men to gather the large transport camels from the rear. They draped the camels in dark, flowing fabrics, tied strange objects to their humps, and fashioned them into bizarre, monstrous silhouettes. When these disguised camels were pushed to the front lines, the effect was immediate. The Sassanid cavalry horses, highly trained but easily spooked by the unfamiliar, were terrified by the strange, looming shapes and the aggressive scent of the camels. The Persian horses bolted, completely disorganizing the Sassanid cavalry lines and leaving their central infantry dangerously exposed. It was a masterclass in adapting to the enemy's tactics, turning the psychological warfare back on the Persians. To keep uncovering these brilliant, overlooked military strategies that shaped empires, hit that subscribe button and join our community. The second day had brought hope, but the true crucible of Al-Qadisiyyah was only just beginning. The brief window of hope closed on the morning of the third day. The Sassanid engineers had worked through the night, repairing the wooden howdahs and reinforcing the iron plating on their beasts. When the sun rose, the 33 armored elephants returned to the front lines. Rostam, eager to end the battle before more Arab reinforcements could arrive, ordered a massive, coordinated offensive across the entire front. With the elephants leading the charge, the Persian infantry followed closely in their massive wake, pushing the Arab forces back with terrifying momentum. The situation was critical. The Arab lines were fracturing under the immense weight of the assault, and panic was once again spreading through the cavalry. Observing the impending disaster from his fortress, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas knew that conventional tactics had failed. The elephant's armor was too thick for arrows, and the men in the towers were untouchable. He sent an urgent, chilling command to his elite shock troops. Ignore the armor, ignore the riders. Aim for the only vulnerable points the beasts possessed. They were to blind the animals and sever their trunks. It was a suicidal order. To execute it, men had to break formation, sprint directly toward the charging behemoths, and dive under the swinging tusks. Armed with heavy spears, small groups of Arab veterans threw themselves at the Sassanid elephants. The battlefield turned into a brutal spectacle of man versus monster. Against all odds, the tactics succeeded. Spears found their marks in the eyes of the lead elephants. Agony replaced training. Blinded, bleeding, and driven completely mad by the sudden, piercing pain, the massive animals lost all sense of direction. They shrieked wildly, violently shaking the archers from their wooden towers. Desperate to escape the torment, the elephants turned away from the Arab lines and charged back the way they came, straight into the dense formations of the Persian heavy infantry. The Sassanid center was trampled by its own ultimate weapon. The giant beasts plunged into the river Atik, trying to wash away the pain, removing the elephant corps from the battle forever. But the relief did not bring a pause to the fighting. The Sassanid lines were in disarray, and the Arabs surged forward to exploit the chaos. The combat became so intense, so deeply entangled, that as daylight faded, neither commander could pull their troops back. The third day bled seamlessly into the night. What followed went down in history as Laylat al-Harir, the Night of Howls. For hours in pitch darkness, the two armies hacked at each other. Without visibility, formations broke down into thousands of isolated, desperate duels. The deafening roar of clashing steel and the cries of exhausted men echoed across the plains until the sun finally began to rise. Dawn broke over a landscape of unimaginable devastation. The fourth day of Al-Qadisiyyah found both armies pushed beyond the absolute limits of human endurance. Men who had been fighting non-stop for over 24 hours could barely lift their shields. The heavy Sassanid armor, once their greatest tactical advantage, had become an exhausting burden under the scorching Iraqi sun. The Arab light infantry were equally battered, their numbers severely depleted. The battle had ground to a suffocating, bloody standstill. Neither side had the physical strength to launch a decisive final charge, yet neither was willing to sound the retreat. But in warfare, when human strength is entirely spent, the environment often casts the final vote. Around midday, the sky did not darken with a volley of arrows, but with something far more overwhelming. The wind began to howl, sweeping across the desert plains and picking up millions of grains of loose earth. A massive shamal, a fierce, blinding sandstorm, descended directly onto the battlefield. For the Arab forces, accustomed to the brutal weather patterns of the peninsula, it was a harsh but familiar phenomenon. But for the Sassanid lines, the timing was catastrophic. The gale-force wind was blowing the thick, suffocating dust straight into their faces. Persian soldiers, already gasping for air from exhaustion, were forced to cover their eyes, their visibility suddenly reduced to mere feet. The disciplined, cohesive Sassanid formations that had held the line for 3 agonizing days began to unravel in the swirling orange haze. Nature had handed the Arab commanders a sudden, narrow window of opportunity, and the veteran tactician, Al-Qadisiyyah, was not going to let it pass. While the Sassanid front line was immobilized by the blinding grit, Al-Qadisiyyah gathered a small, elite detachment of veterans. They didn't aim for a broad offensive. Instead, utilizing the storm as a perfect natural smokescreen, they slipped through the widening gaps in the Persian center. Their objective was singular and absolute: locate the Sassanid command tent and eliminate General Rostam. It was a surgical decapitation strike executed in the middle of a tactical blackout. The Arab detachment pushed deep into the enemy rear, moving like shadows through the dust. The storm had caused total disorientation within the Sassanid camp. Communications were severed, and bodyguards were separated from their commanders. As they closed in on the command position, they found that the heavy canopy sheltering Rostam had been blown down by the fierce winds. The Sassanid general, isolated and stripped of his protective lines, attempted to find refuge near the riverbank, seeking the safety of the water or a boat to escape the encroaching threat. But the hunters were too close. Through the swirling sand, the Arab strike team tracked him down. Cut off from his 60,000-strong army, the brilliant Persian commander was cornered. In the frantic, chaotic moments that followed, General Rostam Farrokhzad was killed. The head of the Sassanid military apparatus was severed in the dust, bringing a violent end to the strategic mind that had anchored the Persian defense. Word of the commander's death is the fastest-traveling disease on any battlefield. Despite the howling wind, the realization that Rostam had fallen began to ripple through the Sassanid ranks. The psychological anchor of the army shattered. Disciplined soldiers who had endured elephants, camel charges, and night terrors finally broke. Panic, absolute and contagious, seized the heavy infantry. The Sassanid army turned their backs to the enemy and ran, desperate to put the Atik River between themselves and the relentless Arab pursuit. The geographical flaw that General Rostam had accepted days earlier now transformed into a catastrophic death trap. With the Atik River directly at their backs, the fleeing Sassanid soldiers bottlenecked at the single crossing. The narrow bridge and the scattered boats were vastly insufficient for tens of thousands of panicked men clad in heavy armor. The Arab forces pressed their advantage without hesitation, driving the crumbling remnants of the Persian army toward the water. Many who escaped the pursuing blades ultimately drowned under the immense weight of their own chainmail. The grand military machine of the Sassanid Empire simply ceased to exist as a cohesive fighting force. The Battle of Al-Qadisiyyah was over, but the echoes of those 4 grueling days would reshape the Middle East for centuries to come. This crushing defeat effectively broke the back of the Persian military, leaving their magnificent capital of Ctesiphon entirely defenseless, and opening the gates for the total conquest of Persia. A sophisticated superpower that had rivaled Rome and dominated the East for over 400 years was dismantled by a force they had initially dismissed as starving desert raiders. When the howling sandstorm finally settled, the armored beasts were gone, the ancient banners had fallen, and the map of the world was irrevocably changed. The Battle of Al-Qadisiyyah proves that in warfare, arrogance is a heavier burden than any armor. Now, I want to hear your tactical assessment. What do you think was General Rostam's fatal mistake? Was it deploying his massive army with a river at their backs, or simply underestimating the resolve of his enemy? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read all of them. Crafting these deep historical dives takes a massive amount of time and research. If you appreciated this journey into the past, leaving a like is the absolute best way to support the channel right now. And if you're hungry for more brilliant tactics, epic standoffs, and the real stories that shaped our world, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We are just getting started. Thanks for watching.